Our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. A dusty day in store for millions of people here in South Korea. In a bid to reduce the concentration of fine dust, the authorities imposed new measures aimed at ensuring we can breathe a little easier. The head of South Korea's central bank says the U.S. China trade war has rocked the South Korean economy. EGL reveals the trade battle between Washington and Beijing has shaved almost 0.5% of growth this year. Plus, undeterred by a police ban, protesters march across Hong Kong in opposition to the government's anti-face mask law. There's more violence as riot police fire water cannons and tear gas at demonstrators. Our top story this morning, those of us here in South Korea have been rather fortunate not to have to worry about this particular issue too much in recent months, but fine dust concentrations in Seoul and the surrounding metropolitan area are expected to reach bad levels today. For the first time this autumn, the authorities will carry out new measures aimed at reducing the amount of fine dust in the air. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
On Monday, people in the entire metropolitan area, the Chungnam region, and parts of Gangwon-do province will have to endure high levels of fine dust. It'll mark the first time fine dust levels are categorized as bad this autumn season. Experts say it's due to foreign pollutants blowing in from China and other countries that cannot escape the atmosphere.
We expect high concentrations of fine dust in the metropolitan area through Wednesday. After that, it's expected to return to normal or good levels.
And with that, for the first time this autumn, the affected regions will carry out new trial measures to reduce fine dust levels. The preliminary measures first come into effect for the public sector a day before possible emergency fine dust reduction measures are imposed. From 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Monday, the alternate no driving day system will be in place for all public sector employees in the metropolitan area. Vehicles working on the African swine fever prevention measures in the northern part of Gyeonggi-do province will be exempt. Also, working hours of administrative agencies and public institutions will be shortened, and construction sites will be required to take strict measures to prevent further dust being created. However, in the case of the preliminary reduction measure, there are no emission level 5 vehicle restrictions and no shortened workdays for the private sector. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea has confirmed that a 10th wild boar in the country has been found dead from African swine fever. The animal's body was discovered last Friday near the inter-Korean border, and the test results came back positive on Sunday. According to the National Institute of Environmental Research, the dead boar was found some 3 kilometers south of the civilian control line in the inter-Korean border town of Yeoncheon. So far, 14 cases of African swine fever have been confirmed at commercial pig farms in South Korea since mid-September. Negotiators from South Korea and the United States will be meeting in Hawaii this week to discuss the issue of defense cost sharing, which will be applied from next year. A fierce debate is expected as there is an enormous gap between how much the two allies think they should pay for South Korea to maintain the upkeep of the roughly 28,000 American troops on its soil. Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
Seoul and Washington will hold their next round of defense cost-sharing talks in Hawaii from Tuesday to Thursday local time. The upcoming talks is the second of their kind since the allies sat down last month to determine how much Seoul should pay for the U.S. troop station in South Korea. Seoul's stand is that it's already covering nearly half of the $1.6 billion U.S., which is related to the facilities and area costs of stationing over 28,000 U.S. soldiers on its soil.
I've stated that the issue of defense cost sharing will be resolved in a rational and just manner.
Washington is expected to ask South Korea to pay $5 billion a year. To this, the South Korean government will likely highlight the fact that it shall only be responsible for costs associated with the facilities and areas that are used by U.S. troops, in accordance to the South Korea-U.S. Status of Forces Agreement, referred to as SOFA. However, the Trump administration is expected to press Seoul to pay a lot more.
South Korea and I have made a deal. They've agreed to pay a lot more money toward the United States.
Considering Seoul has to keep in mind the importance of cooperation with Washington in resolving the North Korean nuclear issue, this week's talks will likely be a tough grind for South Korea's team of negotiators. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, vessels that are illegally transporting North Korean coal have been making repeated port calls in Japan in a possible bid to evade UN sanctions on the regime. According to Tokyo-based Kyodo News on Sunday, such vessels have made over 100 port calls in the country since the UN Security Council banned North Korean coal exports in August 2017. The report adds the vessels, many of which are Panamanian flagged, visited Russia and China before or after arriving in northern and northeastern Japan in order to disguise the origin of their cargo. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper landed in Afghanistan on Sunday in a bid to get a peace agreement and at some point a political agreement with the Taliban after President Trump abruptly broke off negotiations with them last month. Esper told reporters that the number of U.S. troops in Afghanistan could be reduced to around 8,600 from the current 14,000 if needed. One U.S. official said that, considering Trump's sudden withdrawal of troops from northern Syria last week, he could be serious about removing American troops from Afghanistan as well. South Korea's economic growth rate has fallen 0.4 percentage point this year due to the U.S. China trade dispute. Lee Ju-yeol, who is the governor of the Bank of Korea, said in a press conference in Washington that half the decrease is because of a drop in exports due to tariffs imposed between Washington and Beijing. He said the remaining half is due to a slowdown in investment and consumption because of the uncertainties caused by the trade spat. He explained that the trade war's influence is unavoidable since a lot of South Korea's exports go to the US and China. The IMF also expects South Korea to suffer most from the trade dispute. Now, despite the continued improvement in the employment index of women here in South Korea over the past 10 years, studies show there's still a wide gap between the level of women's economic participation and employment rate here in South Korea compared to other advanced countries around the world. This is according to the Korea Economic Research Institute, which conducted a study on the 6 women employment indexes of 7 countries with populations above 50 million and a per capita income of over $30,000. The South Korean government is considering measures to soften the impact of the 52-hour workweek system for small and mid-sized firms due to take effect in just a matter of weeks from now. A senior official at the presidential office announced the measures, including a grace period for firms, during a press briefing Sunday at the Blue House. The system has been in place for large companies since July 2018 and is set to be expanded to companies with 50 to 299 employees from January 1st. But small business owners say the shorter work week could be a financial burden. The official said the government will come up with measures if the legislative process to supplement the 52-hour work week system does not go so smoothly. What will cars be like in the future? Now, there has, of course, been a lot of speculation for years now that flying cars could be one possibility. We've yet to see them, of course. In fact, what was once considered science fiction, though, is close to becoming science fact, an actual commercial reality. The market, according to experts, is expected to be worth hundreds of billions of dollars in the next 20 years. And this means global tech giants have joined the race to get ahead in this industry, and South Korean researchers are well in the mix as well. Yoon Jung-min with this report.
This moving computer graphic shows what it would be like when a personal air vehicle flies across the urban sky. A local aerospace research institute is working with automobile companies, aircraft manufacturers, and universities to develop these flying cars.
We have successfully manufactured and tested light aircraft using our own designs and technology over the last 5 years. Based on our know-how, we are currently participating in the personal air vehicle project.
Flying cars take off and land vertically using tilt rotors. They will not only be capable of flying but driving on the roads as well. Low-speed models can speed by at up to 100 kilometers per hour, while high-speed ones can fly as fast as 200 kilometers per hour.
South Korean technology is competitive for high-speed models because we have been developing tilt rodders since 2002. Through years of studies, we've developed improved tilt rodder technology. Korea also has a strong IT infrastructure which helps provide services for flying cars.
The advanced vehicle requires new technology such as lighter batteries, new energy sources, and self-driving technology. As well as solving technical issues such as making lighter flying cars, experts say it is equally important to make detailed safety rules for them.
Another part which is very important is regulating the traffics. Some vehicles may fly right near or above land, or some, the vehicles may go up above that. So there might be some structures of road for these vehicles. So we have to make, quite precise regulations to make these vehicles freely flow.
Experts differ on exactly when these cars will be fully commercialized, but many expect it to be around by 2040. Morgan Stanley forecasts the market to grow to $1.5 trillion by then. Global tech giants, including the U.S., France, and Germany, have already started developing flying cars and will compete with South Korea to lead the future market. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, Samsung Electronics' latest foldable smartphone, the Galaxy Fold 5G, goes on full sale from today at both online and offline retailers. The model, released last month, could only be pre-ordered up until now, and there were a number of units were actually limited sharply. Galaxy Fold 5G comes in two different colors, Cosmos Black and Space Silver, and costs slightly over $2,000 US, so certainly not a budget option. When folded, the smartphone can be used in a compact size with a 4.6-inch display. However, when expanded, it has a 7.3-inch screen. That is the largest display among any Galaxy smartphone. U.S. President Donald Trump is insisting on bringing American soldiers back from what he calls America's endless wars in the Middle East. However, his Pentagon chief now says all U.S. troops withdrawn from Syria by President Trump last week will now be heading to western Iraq, adding the U.S. military will continue operations against the Islamic State group. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Dami. So, Dami, U.S. forces have been seen leaving northeastern Syria, but instead of returning home, like I'm sure they would have hoped, it appears they're being redeployed to Iraq.
Right, Mark. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper laid out the current plan on Sunday, saying that all the troops leaving Syria will be redeployed to western Iraq. Speaking to reporters en route to the Middle East, Esper noted that American forces will continue operations against the Islamic State group to prevent its resurgence. However, AP reported that Esper didn't rule out the idea that U.S. forces would conduct counterterrorism missions from Iraq to Syria. His comments were the first to specifically detail the plan after leaving Syria and what the ongoing mission against ISIS could look like. Esper said he had already discussed with his Iraqi counterparts that more than 700 U.S. troops will shift from Syria to western Iraq adding that the withdrawal could take several weeks. And around 200 to 300 U.S. forces will remain in southern Syria. President Trump tweeted, USA soldiers are not in combat or ceasefire zones. We have secured the oil, bringing soldiers home. Trump ordered the withdrawal of around 1,000 U.S. troops in northeastern Syria after Turkey announced its plan to invade Syria to fight Kurdish forces. Undeterred by a police ban, hundreds of thousands of protesters marched across Hong Kong on Sunday in opposition to the government's anti-mask law. Pro-democracy demonstrators blocked roads, set fires, and vandalized Chinese banks and subway exits, expressing strong anti-Chinese sentiment. And again, familiar scenes of unrest were seen as riot police fired water cannons and tear gas at demonstrators. Hong Kong government implemented the anti-mask law 2 weeks ago, and recent so-called white terror attacks have further escalated tensions in Hong Kong. Last week, the leader of a Hong Kong pro-democracy group was smashed in the head with hammers and spanners by at least 4 non-ethnic Chinese assailants in Mongkok. The UK government and the European Union managed last week to agree on a new deal laying out the terms of Brexit. But even some 3.5 years after the referendum, it appears a lack of support from UK lawmakers is going to further delay Britain's departure from the EU. Oh Soo-young breaks down the issue.
An extension to the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union is looking more and more likely by the day, following the House of Commons vote on Saturday for an amendment requiring the government to ask Brussels to extend the October 31st deadline. Prime Minister Boris Johnson was forced to send a document with the request, though without a signature. This came as a blow to Johnson's efforts to ratify a new deal reached with the EU on the terms of Britain's departure. Critics say Johnson's plan is only slightly different from former PM Theresa May's proposals. It suggests that Northern Ireland retains the EU single market rules on trade with its southern neighbour, and that goods from the rest of the UK will be subject to tariffs if there's a risk of them crossing the border. But the plan seems to have failed to convince lawmakers, least of all those from the Democratic Unionist Party, which refuses to accept different terms of departure for Northern Ireland.
At this stage, everything is possible. We are in absolutely uncharted parliamentary territory here. There are roughly half of the members of Parliament, about 300, 350, who have looked at what it means to leave the European Union without a deal and really don't like what they see. They've also seen the deal that the Prime Minister has brought back from Brussels, and really it doesn't suit anybody. There will be a delay that leaves everything on the table. We could still have a no-deal, very, very messy exit. The Prime Minister could still get his way, or this could even go back to the people either through a general election or, less likely, a people's vote second referendum.
Hundreds of thousands of people marched in London over the weekend for a second referendum on leaving the EU, which would take around 22 weeks to organise if pursued. In the meantime, Johnson is continuing to push for an on-time Brexit.
He still believes that this is the best he's going to get from Europe. He is probably right in that, and that because of the boredom in the nation, he will be able to force it through. He's going to make the meaningful vote now a legislative vote, which he hopes will be enough to win over enough of the waverers to give him victory. It probably won't be the 31st. It's not even enough time in Europe for them to conduct the appropriate scrutiny.
With just 10 days until the deadline, the government hopes to push through a meaningful vote this week. But observers say breaking the Brexit impasse won't be likely by that time. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. And it's Monday, so we're going to talk a little bit more about health-related stories. So if you are heading outside to enjoy the autumn weather, which has been nice, at least up until today with the fine dust, people are advised to wear long clothes and pack tick repellent. With a peak in tick activity, protection against tick-borne illnesses is crucial. And trust me, you don't want to get a tick-borne illness. Park Se-young with more.
With mountains covered in fall foliage and fruits and greens ripe and full, it's the perfect time to head out and enjoy the autumn season. However, tick activity peaks in autumn, and so do cases of tick-borne illnesses like scrub typhus.
Scrub typhus starts in September and peaks in October and November. It's related to the generation of Leptotrombidium pallidum larvae at this time of the year.
Many patients are in their 50s to 70s. With the aging population and farming in mountain villages, the elderly are thought to be getting bitten while harvesting crops.
We think the elderly in the rural areas become exposed mostly while working during harvest time in autumn.
Scrub typhus is transmitted to humans when bitten by certain types of trombiculid mites. Symptoms of high fever, muscle aches, and rashes appear after a latent period of 1 to 3 weeks. The bite area becomes covered with a black scab, and the infection can even lead to death. Severe fever with thrombocytopenia syndrome, or SFTS, which causes multiple organ failure, also peaks during this time of the year. In the last 5 years, 830 people were infected with tick-borne illnesses in Korea. Of that total, 156 people died. Because neither of the illnesses have vaccines, people doing outdoor activities are advised to wear long-sleeve shirts and long pants and to use insect repellent. It also helps to take a thorough shower and wash your clothes after getting home. And those with symptoms like high fever within 3 weeks of outdoor activities should see a doctor as soon as possible. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Now, concerns growing over a harmful chemical found in receipt paper here in South Korea. A lawmaker with the Environment and Labour Committee, citing a recent government study, said high levels of the hormone-disrupting chemical BPA were found in nearly half of the samples tested. Now, BPA is used on receipt paper due to its stability and high heat resistance. The lawmakers said the samples contain more than 60 times the recommended amount set by the European Union. Currently, there are no safety standards regarding BPA in South Korea, which the lawmaker said needs to change.
Good morning. Polluted air has blown in from overseas, and fine dust is here again for the capital area in Chungcheongnam-do province. And the air pollution will get even worse tomorrow, with the season's first round of yellow dust forecast to sweep over some parts of the country. But wide temperature gaps are in store for today. Mountainous regions at morning lows in the single digits, but highs will jump into the 20s, leading to a temperature difference of nearly 15 degrees Celsius. And daily highs in most areas will be hovering in the mid-20s. Seoul will get up to 25 degrees Celsius, and that's nearly 6 degrees higher than season norms. And sunny skies will feature, but those of us in the western parts of the country, again, will need to check the dust levels before heading outside. Higher than average temperatures will continue this week, with mostly sunny skies in the forecast for here in the capital, while rain is in the forecast for some other parts of the country. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now on this Monday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to us here on Arirang TV. And My daily reminder that our next newscast is coming up with our very own Lee Ji-yoon at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.